The next portion we'll work on is our logo area. So we're going to build just a simple logo and place it up here in the top left, and then we'll focus on building our navigation elements over here on the right with their hover and selected states. So let's start with our logo, and I'm just going to create a new layer here above my featured images and get my type tool, and I'll select font here. I'm going to use Myriad Pro for the font. Of course, you can design or use whatever font you want here. And I'll come out here, and this is going to be called Evercool Corporation. And so I'm going to type Evercool and resize that. I can just free transform that and pull that up a little bit. And I'm going to hold down Option, click Shift, and drag that down to duplicate that layer. And then double click it and call this Corporation. Now you could have easily just right clicked over here and said duplicate layer, or you could have created a new layer and got a new type layer to duplicate that. And I'll take the corporation layer, and I'm going to make that quite a bit bigger. It's going to be the dominant part of the logo, and I'm going to place it over here. I want the C of the corporation to kind of hang exactly where this line would come up from this outer edge. So I'm going to place that right over there. And the Evercool, I'm going to size that and drop it down into the logo a little bit so that it fills up the space between the C and the R. So we'll kind of play around with that a little bit till I get something that's I'm happy with. Excuse me, and maybe that's about good right there. So I'll leave my logo right there. It's just going to be a simple Evercool Corporation, and the color of that is just white. So I'm going to pull those colors of both of those layers up to white. I'm double clicking the layer there to highlight the text, and then I can select the color and it will change the text of those layers. So there's my logo, Evercool Corporation, and I may tweak the spacing on that just a little bit later, but we'll consider that good for now. Now the next portion is going to be the navigation boxes over here, and they're going to be a little bit more involved because we have to add a normal state, a selected state, and then a hover state. So we'll be building each of those layers right now. Now I'm going to use the same font for those logos, so I'll come down here to my type tool, and I'm going to group these two elements that make up the logo into a folder and call that logo. And then I'll create a new layer above that where I'm going to start to build my navigation. So I'll just click out here and I'll just say change, and then I'm going to resize this up to the size that I want my logo elements to be. And on my navigation over here, you can see on the main page I've got these 1, 2, 3, 4 links here, and so I'm going to create a similar layout and just have the 4 links as well. So I'm going to use that same trick. I'm going to hold down Option and Shift and click and drag this out 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'll just change the text of all these. So I'll call one clients. We'll call one different. These words are supposed to be all fancy. And we'll call this one about or store, or doesn't really matter. And then I want to evenly space all these out. So I'm going to get the client's logo and position the outer bound first. So it's going to hang about where the edge of the page goes. And then the about is going to hang maybe over here. And then if I select each of these elements, so all 4 of those layers, I can come up here to my, as long as I have my move tool selected, and you'll notice that there's some options in here for distributing these elements along vertical or horizontal centers. So this option right here delivers along a horizontal center, and there's also deliver along vertical centers as well. So I'm just going to single click that. You can see that evenly spaces those out, and then I can kind of tweak from there. And I think it uses the center point, so I may need to manually change those a little bit just to kind of make sure that I want the space in between each of these buttons to roughly be the same. So that looks about right. All right, then we'll add our selected state. So on the clients button, I'm going to create a new layer, and directly underneath that layer, I'm just going to grab a rectangle tool down here on my shape layer and just come out here and click and drag a rectangle around that layer. And I want it to come right out to the edge of the document bound. Let's minimize that. Come up here and make sure it's pixel perfect. So I'll free transform that and pull it out so it snaps right to that edge. And then I'm going to need to change the color of the client's text. So I'm going to highlight that client's text, come up here to my swatches, and I'm going to select that orange color that was part of the color scheme earlier. And now I can rearrange this a little bit. So I'm going to select all of the layers that correspond to the text. Make sure I'm on my move tool and then just nudge those over so that my clients is somewhere in the middle there of the button. Pull those down a little bit, and then I'll free transform that rectangle again to center that up in between each of those. So that's kind of roughed in there, and that works pretty well. And again, this is going to be the selected state. So on the page that the client or the user of your website is on is the selected state. So I might want to take that client, and maybe when they're on the selected state, that is down a little bit. So you can kind of use some of your own design freedom there to change that up. So that's going to be the basis for our navigation element with the hover state. Now you'll notice back here, or rather the selected state, if we go back to our Finder window, and I'm going to minimize Photoshop here and pull back up this original folder and open back up the HTML, the final design is actually going to have a little bit of effect to it. So when I hover over the button, it's going to fade in and then turn orange. And you can see there's a little bit of a shadow on the text. And we're going to do a lot of those effects with CSS 3 using some box shadows and some transitions. So we'll tweak this a little bit and change the font as well when we get to the HTML. But for our mock-up, we'll just leave it like this for now. All right, the next step in the next video is we're going to move down inside of our sidebar area and start to design out the sidebar content.